Good afternoon, children. Welcome to today the class 9th standard, 9th lesson, the age of revolutions. This lesson, what are the objectives you are going to learn? They are 3 revolutions. What were the 3 revolutions? One we say American War of Independence, French Revolution and Industrial Revolution. Second one, Thomas Jefferson's statement. What he came to say about that is American War of Independence. Colonies of European powers, particularly Britain established 13 colonies in northern part of America. So that how it was, what happened, we see under the topic colonies of European powers. Next, plantations and the slave labor. In the colonial country, the colonial powers were established plantations, so they required labor. Then later, how they became slaves, which resulted what? This is the topic. Next, increasing incidence of taxation. How the people were suffered for increasing taxation. Next, different acts. The colonial powers brought many acts to collect the revenue and suppress the people. Next, Boston Massacre and its result. Because of those sufferings, here in the place of Boston, many people were massacred. Then, following that, repealing of Boston, that is Townshend Act. Another one objective, Boston Tea Party. When Britain refused to allow that is local merchant to sell the tea, they organized Boston Tea Party. American War of Independence, First Continental Congress, Second Continental Congress, Battle of Bunker Hill, Declaration of Independence, Washington attack, that is the chief commander-in-chief, how he made a war. French alliance, France and America made an alliance. Victory at Yorktown. Then results finally, because of French victory, which were that is changes brought in France means Republican government, written constitution, declaration of rights of man and citizen. These are the objectives we are going to see one by one. Now students, see here 3 revolution. American War of Independence, though it was not a very big one as that of French Revolution, but politically it brought great influence among the people. Whereas French Revolution brought both on political and social level. It shook the foundation of the political level and society level. But here we say, based on that revolution, Jefferson, very beginning of 1774, he asserted that the people of America were neither means nor that is desire to get independence. Same Jefferson, in the Continental Congress of 13 colonies, he asserted that all men are equal. So it shows that how people were ready for independence and they needed for liberty. Then next we see about the colonies of European powers. How many European powers they started to establish colonies in northern part of America. Very beginning, the Portuguese and that is Spanish were the people established the colonies, whereas the English lagged behind. When John Cabot in 1497, when he made a voyage, that time they had only the theoretical claim. Later, only that is 16th century, they had what we say coastal town of Nova Scotia. The Nova Scotia region, they had only that is claim, but they did not have any demand for that. But one, that Jamestown was the first British colony established along that is coast of North America. Here, after that Jamestown, a group of Puritans who went and established colonies and reaching place what we called New, that is Plymouth. And New Plymouth, it was the region they named. Here, who were called Puritans. Puritans were the group of people who organized a religious movement. They supported outward that is policies and principles, but they opposed the traditional rights and customs. So they always opposed the church, that is church conditions, activities. So they were always condemned under the English kings, Stuart King particularly, James I and Charles I. They driven the Puritans to out of that is place. That is why they moved towards what west side of America. So such type of Puritans, when they tried to establish colonies, that was called New Plymouth. Then another one group of Puritans batch in Mayflower, they reached what we say under Winthrop. They established a colony. That is what we called Pennsylvania. Then after that one by one, Danes, French, Germans were the other Europeans established colonies, but by the 18th century, all the colonies were controlled by British. That is 13 colonies. That 13 colonies, I say that is, are Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Virginia, Northern Carolina, Southern Carolina, the Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and so on. So these colonies where population increased 13 million, nearly half of the British population. After establishing these colonies, they were started to broad plantations to increase their business. Particularly, tobacco was cultivated in these colonies when they felt that is a shortage of labor. Why? The Native Americans were refused to work under them as a slave. So the Europeans found the labor from other side, particularly from Africa. They were brought in man-hand. That means from Africa, the labors were caught and brought in a shape in cruel condition. Even half of the people labors were died on their travel long distance, and even they reached, anyone tried to escape, they were shot down. So such type of threatening and cruel harassment, they were forced to work in the plantations. Already the northern farms were compact farm, not as that of southern side. So the Native Americans were not belong to any of these category. That means two economic system. One was owners, that is capitalists. Another one was laborers. The Native Americans who refused to work under them, they automatically drive out of that place. They disperse and settled in different places. That type we say as Red Indians. Nowadays that term not used. They refused to work under them. That's why they spread in many places of the world. Their number is now reducing. They were world tribes of America. See, after this plantation and slave labor, when they have to be brought, they started to implement many acts. The British Parliament. This act which compelled them in very critical situation. One act was Sugar Act. It was passed in 1774, imposed duties on sugar, molasses, wine, silk and coffee. So as a result, local merchants were suffered much. They were started to protest against this. Further, Quartering Act was passed. Quartering Act was for, according to this act, they were required to accept the expenditure of British forces which were established in American colonies. And another one, Stamp Act. The Stamp Act was passed in 1775, which required that people, those who produced that is material, printing material, want to use the material which was printed in London, that carrying embossed revenue stamp. Embossed means the figure, the royal figure encarved in that is either in stamp paper or in some places. So that type of paper they have to be used to produce the material, printed material. So this was what insulted to them. Then another one final, that is highlight, Townshend Act. Townshend, Townshend. George Townshend, a British general, passed another one act which imposed duties on other products, new products, paper, paint, lead, tea, etc. But what happened? Already many more taxes were they faced. In addition, these products increase the burden of taxation. So again the protests were what we say started much. When they were used to the protest, the people were started to protest against that is when that is Boston Tea Party was held. Because the Townshend Act protested the repealing of Townshend Act. What do you mean by repealing of Act? Repealing means relaxation of some taxes. But the British Parliament repealed some products taxes, but it retained the taxes on what? Tea, which enable British tea sellers, especially British East India Company, to sell their tea in their places, in their colonies. To enhance their profit, that was retained. Again it was what? Protest. See, it was made it as what? Especially Georgetown, Philadelphia, those places, they started to protest. It was called as Boston Tea Party. After the following this Boston Tea Party, British government realized that they could not be able to bear that is challenges. They felt this was unchallengeable problem or the protest. So they were ready to ask to act against it. In the meantime, we say George Washington, who has become as what Commander-in-Chief of American forces. That we say American War of Independence. Here we say this year American War of Independence. There we see George Washington, who first asserted that no thinking man in America desired for independence. That means what? The very first the people protest was aimed only against the taxation and for the strictness of their trade. So their battle cry was no taxation without representation. Then after that we see First Continental Congress. When the British government realized the protest was going on in vigorous, that people under what we say opposer, they formed that is Continental Congress. They brought a constitution method. Under this constitution, they brought us what some of that is changes. What were that? Following that is Boston Tea Party, when George Washington's assertion, people of America very beginning decided to fight against the taxation and the trade. The Continental Congress was formed. Why it was formed? Because of that is British felt unchallengeable disturbance, protest. They appointed the Governor General Cage in Boston and dispatched the British army around Boston and given him that is power to cool the revolt. Cool means to suppress the revolt, or we say as what a revolution. As a result, Jefferson in Virginia Assembly he stated that June 1st, 1775, he underwent fasting and prayer. Disturbed by his statement, the governor dissolved that is Virginia and declared the following the resolution. 1. They decided to make intolerable act were null and void. Because the British passed intolerable act. What was that intolerable act? According to that act, people of America who opposed the British government and they were caught and brought to Britain. They faced trial and given for death sentence. So this was what under Continental Congress resolution they decided to make this act was null and void. Second one, they decided to bring about American War of Declaration of Rights. Then third one what we say about this act was make it as British favorable for more profit. So they decided to bring about economic sanctions against the British. Next incident, Second Continental Congress. That is Second Continental Congress was assembled on May 10, 1775. Here who were the major leaders means John Adams, Sam Adams and Henry Lee, then for Thomas Jefferson were the main leaders. They here took a resolution to establish Continental Army around the Boston equal to that of British Army. And the second one, in order to get some more truce from the king, he sent a olive branch petition to the king and also declared that article declaration of causes and reason why they were ready to take up the weapons. Then following that, many more, that is, resolutions were brought. What were, that is, resolutions means postal department were established. Then another one we say as after postal department, committee was established to negotiate with Native Americans. And another one, commissioner were appointed to acquire possible way of foreign aid. So these were some resolutions made in Second Continental Congress, that is progressive step. Then in the meantime, the first time there arose a war in Bunker Hill. Where is Bunker Hill? In Massachusetts colony. In Massachusetts Bunker Hill, the first war was fought there. That is Washington, it is defeated what we say forces. Nearly 2,200 British soldiers were twice they were defeated, started to retreat. But the third time, the British forces were got victory, emerged as victorious. After this, George Washington assumed that is control of American forces. Then later, the British forces were evacuated from Boston. Then another incident we see, Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence, how it resulted after prolonging the process on the American side, an anonymous pamphlet, that is nameless pamphlet, which was circulated in 1776 throughout America, which was Thomas Paine, Common Sense, which revealed against, that is, allegiance of a crown, and also it expressed about complete independence. In the same time, Henry Lee also declared that is American War of Independence. Once George Washington expressed about the article of Thomas Paine, Common Sense, it made a great influence. Greatly it changed the minds of the American people. That much it inspired, that is, people's mind. Then later some leaders like what we say Henry Lee took a step to brought a draft in, that is, independence. Same way later after discussion this draft was made by Jefferson and it was adopted in the assembly. So children, that is July 4. July 4, it was celebrated as American War of Independence. Then next we say about another incident, Washington's attack. In July 2, 1774, Washington, that is the British wanted to regain lost territories. So under Hovey, attacked Washington forces and forced him to evacuate from Long Island. But however, American forces managed to reach Pennsylvania. From there, they attacked the British forces at Trenton and later they were defeated at Princeton. Then next we say about after Washington's attack, what happened means there was an alliance between France and America. How it was happened? When Britain tried to split, that is North American colonies into two, that was failed. Following that, that is split was failed, however, they managed to occupy Philadelphia. But the Philadelphia near a town was tried by George Washington to establish, but that was defeated by Lord Cornwallis. Later, in the Battle of Saratoga, British forces were defeated by George Washington forces. After this defeat, France and America made an alliance. That is, according to this alliance, France accepted America's independence, that is United States of America, and offered trade concession. Next, we are going to see about victory at Yorktown. Here, Washington got support from, that is French forces as alliance. Now, both French forces and American forces jointly attacked, that is British forces at Yorktown. Who was that time? General Cornwallis, defeated in 1781. That time, a music band played like this. The world turned upside down. The British forces were started to evacuate. Thus, children, this way how America is relieved, got freedom from British government. Next, we are going to see about what were, that is American results of American War of Independence. 1. The first result was America got independence. Second one we say about it made us what a republic. Third one what we say, declaration of War of Independence, it was a model for other countries, other European countries. Then next one, freedom of equality and abolition of feudal rights, feudal privileges were made. Then Declaration of Confederation, or we say Articles of Confederation was set up. Based on this, they decided to constitute separate constitution, which brought a written constitution. In the written constitution, they bring freedom, liberty, and so on. That is the children. Now how today we are seeing, that is America, developed America, it was the result of their war against the colonial power. Next topic, children, we are going to see about a French Revolution. Now children, the American colonies, 13 colonies, here what I listed, New Hampshire, New York, New Jersey, those places were marked here. Further, you go through the atlas and get practice for your clearance. Then, children, we are going to see about a French Revolution. The French Revolution, what were that is content? We are going to see about one about ancient regime and Estates General. What was ancient regime in France? Nearly 140 years what rule enjoyed before this revolution by the monarchy that was existed political and social system was called as ancient regime. Under this, Louis XIV and their followers and the Versailles Palace, which existed as royal absolutism and also greatness of France. Then further, when they introduced the King Louis, he introduced Estate General. What was that is Estate General means? They comprised of representatives of three classes. One was clergy, men and women ordained for doing religious duties. Second one, nobles. Third one, say commons. When he summoned the general estates, there was a burst of revolution. How it happened means, these third category people, commons, were refused to obey the orders of king or nobles. They proclaimed themselves National Assembly and gathered in tennis court and declared and swore oath they did not disperse until the king provided them a constitution. So thus that is French Revolution started there. Why it was happened? See, when the king ordered them to clear or to set out them, it was happened. Why? What were the causes which resulted such type of controversy between commons and king? Now we see one by one causes for French Revolution. One, political causes. Politically, how the people got dissatisfaction means King, that is Louis XV, was succeeded by Louis XIV, who was ruled the region nearly 59 years, did not learn any lesson from the revolution which was occurred in England. And also, beheading of Charles, King of England, that was also not realized them why it was happened. Because under that is law, here king was not above the law. He was bound by the law. So such type of lesson he not learned. Then another, Louis XVI succeeded by Louis XV. He was always under the influence of his wife, Mary Antoinette, who believed the more than the king in the theory of divine right of kingship. What was that theory? Usually, those were the time it was considered that king was the representative of God, so all these activities of the king accountable only for God and no one else or no other he had to be accountable to answer. So such type of rule it was hated by the people. So generally we say the rulers were not care for the subject. Another cause we say, second one, economic. Economically too the French people were suffered much. How they were suffered? They faced more poverty. Some reasons I say how their economic crisis make that is suffering. One, France involved in 7 years of war with England. So the 7 years duration was much, which cost them heavily. So that was what we say, much burden. Second one, the economic crisis for France supported American War of Independence. So that was the second how the economy has drained. Next, third one, royals, king, nobilities and palace members, family members all were enjoyed a luxury life. The way of luxury life has more cost, more expenditure. That time, some of the finance ministers of France, when they suggested to reduce the taxation, for example, the ministers' names were Turgot, Necker, Brainy, Colony, were some of them. They insisted the king to reduce that is royal expenditure. This advice was not only discarded, but also they were dismissed from the job. It was what would happen continuously, the economic condition became worse. In the meantime, they were what we say started to borrow more money. Why the government started to buy in order to face the resource crunch? They started more debt. Then later nearly half of that is income revenue of France they made payment for the interest. So in this way, economy of France faced a severe crisis and went bankrupt. Then further, social causes. How was the French society means? People were suffered for food. Even one loaf of bread, they were what we say, more suffering. How it was resulted means first one was due to bad harvest. Second one, maximum laborers, peasants, merchants and workers were faced such type of food shortage. Then the next third one, more taxation on them. They could not be able to spend more money for that. Then increasing of prices of the especially food items. Then next what would happen? Following this incident, official report tells about nearly 11 lakh beggars were existed. Official record statement this. So through this we assess that how France maximum people were led to poverty life. Further, nobles, clergy we say is the first two category people. That first we take for clergy people. Actually they were minority only, 1,30,000 people. They were exempted from taxation and they started to collect, that is a tax which was called tithe. The tithe, what we say as what, 1/10 of the annual produce, they collected from the peasants. And another category, nobles, they were empowered to collect the federal dues and also owning their land, asked that is people to cultivate that land. Even their products were processed only in the factories and mills of these nobles. All this production, land and processing, everything in the hands of the nobles, which led that is common people, where the common people which comprised of merchants, businessmen, lawyers, the wealthy landowners, all together we say the common people. They suffered much, which led to for what we say below living condition. In addition, they were what we say faced harassment when they not able to pay that is tax or could not be able to give. So that time they were faced cruel treatment. That time when they have to be faced as what here we say apart from that is social causes. When the women suffer for a loaf of bread, they gathered in a mass, they started the protest. In addition, philosophers' writings and thinkings. Some of the philosophers' name I say, Voltaire, Rousseau, Montesquieu, and we say D'Alembert, Diderot were famous philosophers, writers in France. They are thinking new ideas, revolutionary writings which made influence in the minds of that is French people. Some way I say, first Voltaire, who was a great writer and great critic of church activities. He criticized that is activities of the church. His work was Candide, Candide. It reveals about the conditions prevailed in France. Then further he stated that is the one who believe you in absurdities and they make you to commit atrocities. He stated through this statement, understand that people always make you to direct in wrong way. So he insisted the people in go on for what we say towards the right. And another one writer who was called Rousseau, younger than Voltaire. He was also a political activist. He has influenced his ideas to insist about freedom. Then his book, it was called Social Contract. That book reveals about how that is people were suffered in society. He asserted that men are born free, a man is born free, but he is everywhere in chain. That shows what we free man, but because of some system and their actions, the man is not feeling the breath of freedom. So that was his point. Then another one, we say Montesquieu. Montesquieu works were two. One, Persian letters and the law of spirit. It tells about separation of powers. The power should be divided among the three. One between executive, legislature and judiciary. Why he suggested that separation of power means in order that they can keep a check over the other to avoid misuse of power, misuse rule and avoid corruption. Then apart from some encyclopedia of Diderot and D'Alembert, all which influenced the people's mind as what to fought against that colonial power, especially monarchy, Louis XIV's harassment rule, and they decided to get freedom to set up a Republic of France. Then, after these causes, we are going to see about how the French people were started to going towards establishing Republic France. Course of the French Revolution. Under the course of French Revolution, first one we see the fall of Bastille. It was considered as turning point. How it happened? Already I told you. When the King Louis summoned, that is the three estates as estate general, that when they were proclaimed National Assembly, they were not cleared out, that king ordered to clear that. They gathered in tennis court and took a oath. They won't disperse until the king given them separate constitution. So that time the king ordered them to disperse using the forces. Even they resisted, king used forces to fire. That time the people, angered people in Paris, they started to attack Bastille prison, which was what we say storehouse of weapons and also a protective place for that is French palace. So they started to attack and they released the imprisoned person, which was a victory, first victory for the French people against the monarchy. After that is fall of Bastille, what happened? Formation of National Assembly. Now, what was National Assembly? It constitutes of middle class liberals, that we say moderate liberals. They needed on the lines of American and England type of constitution. So that is why they brought some types of reforms, abolition of serfdom, federal rights, federal privileges. And then we say clergymen, those who enjoy that is more tax exemption and their titles, all were what we say abolished. In addition, they separate that is a church and state, and confiscation of church property by the state. See, even though the National Assembly introduced such a type of reforms, they could not be able to meet their food demand. what even a loaf of bread they started to beg from the king. But both king and queen they refused to provide. Women were started to march, that is Versailles. The Versailles Palace, women, children, all for demanding that is bread. That when they refused, there would happen all together started to attack king and their family members. As a result, the king dressed himself as a valet, that means male servant. And also he did not reconcile to follow the law passed by National Assembly. As a result, he escaped from Paris to Varennes, Vareness. But on the way, it was a border town, a postman was found and handed over to French National Guard and he was imprisoned. Now children, finally, after the end of the lesson, for your easy preparation, the lesson what are the years and the events are coming, that you have to be focused. It would help you for timeline. 1776, Thomas Jefferson's firm. Next, July 1776, Jefferson's second assertion. 1497, John Cabot's voyage. 1607, British first colony, that is Jamestown, was established. 1620, Mayflower ship carrying the first batch of Puritans. 1775, population of 13 colonies raised. 1756 to 63, 7 years war. 1764, Sugar Act. 1765, Quartering Act and Stamp Act. 1767, Townshend Act. 1770, Boston Massacre. 1773, Boston Tea Party. 1774, George Washington's statement. September 5, 1774, First Continental Congress. Then 1774, Jefferson's Declaration in Virginia Assembly. Then June 1, 1774, fasting and prayer. Then 1775, May 10, Second Continental Congress. July 1775, appointment of commissioners. Like the children, you see that is here. I show you to near to you years and events. You focus this, it would help you. Then another one preparation students, vocabulary. What are the odd words are coming in this lesson? You underline that and collect that is. Here I say few words. Enchanted, bring about, lagged, moved too slowly. That is theoretical, fundamental principles. Dispensing, deal above. Then steward, member of royal family. Persecution, harassment, so on. I given you here list of that is vocabulary words, and also you see this page. All you listed out, you come to understand. And another one, here this chart, also the list of the words. You can able to understand this. These vocabularies, you can realize that. Thank you children. You have to be prepared the lesson based on list out vocabularies or words and question answers year wise and statement wise, leaders wise, their assertion. If you prepare means it would help you for exam point of view. Dear children, now we see Girondins and Jacobins and emigres, who were called Girondins. See, the people who were, that is formed, that is National Assembly, they were called as what? Girondins. They needed king should be as limited monarchy. Whereas Jacobins were hardcore people. Generally, they were opposition of official policy. Emigres were, at the time of French Revolution, who escaped to England particularly, but they were some nobles, landlords and rich people who opposed the revolution continuously started to protest. So after this protest, what happened means they formed a constitution of 1791. Under this constitution, the aim was, it was first constitution in France brought by National Assembly. Under this, the King Louis XVI was tried. It was taken immediately and he was guillotined. Then next we say further some changes. A single body of 750 members of legislature was brought about. But later, when that incident happened, they were involved in continuous struggle. At the time of that, June 1793 to July 1794, there were some works carried out. What were that conventions work? Constitution of 1791, its aim was to provide limitation of power to the king. Based on that, the king was limited monarchy, and next they were tried to bring about some changes. But that changes what we say, a single body of 750 members of legislature. But the people of our revolutionaries of Bastille prison did not like such type of developments. So they were dissatisfied. They formed the Paris Commune. Actually, the Paris Commune was considered as rival of National Assembly. Then, where that is the people, emigres particularly, they were started to protest these revolutionaries involved in that is resistance, which resulted September Massacre. How it was called as September Massacre means, in the month of September, nearly 1,500 the dissidents were caught and trial and they were killed. So that is why it was called as September Massacre. After that, what we see about the conventions, reign of terror. Why it is resulted means the National Convention was formed. Its aim was to make France was a republic. After announcement of a republic, the trial of King Louis XVI was taken immediately. He was guillotined. Then further what would happen? Here they started to commit reign of terror. How it was resulted means, when they introduced conscription, some section of the people, especially peasants, did not like this conscription because that forces were involved in Russian war, Austrian war and Prussian war. So they were not concentrated on the welfare of the people. They decided to involve in the war. So that movement totally disregarded or departed from the ancient regime. The National Convention brought a new calendar that was called a secular calendar, that is religious based calendar, which was the months were named, saints name, Christian festivals name, etc. was totally as deleted from the calendar, and instead of that natural elements based calendar was introduced, The months were named as example a tree, a flower, seed, animal and or a tool, etc. And also they introduced 10 days a week, and old measures were replaced and metric system of measures. For example, kilometer, kilogram were introduced. So such type of changes when the National Convention which also introduced law of suspects. That a law of suspect was introduced in the year 1793. According to this act, the people, those who opposed the revolution were brought under trial by the revolutionary court, and later they were sentenced to death. Then following this incident, there were a reign of terror began. How it was reign of terror began means the law of suspect, which provided a chance for a lot of people to commit crime. When Continental, Robespierre, Herbert were emerged as great leaders of National Convention, but they were different in views and opinions. So that time, when among them, when the false news or message, when it is spread, many people were started to crime. And a month later, the 1793, nearly 23, the Girondins deputies were trialed by revolutionary court. They were killed. Thus began what we say reign of terror. And the continuation was one by one, the people faced terror condition. One what we say Vendy revolt. At a place Vendy, the peasants they started to oppose conscription. So they were, both those who involved in that protest, they were caught, trial and executed. They were killed. And next, some of them who were celebrated a great festival of reason and liberty in the Notre Dame Cathedral, because they opposed entirely Christian festival who wanted to worship of reason. They celebrated such type of festival, but that was organized by Herbert and his followers. That time, the Continental and Robespierre, who were basically traditional religious people, see, they were not involved in that. So that is why Herbert and the followers were guillotined. But later, Continental, by observing the continuous guillotine of so many people, he started to oppose Robespierre. Because of that, Danton was also guillotined. Finally, Robespierre was surrounded by enemies and totally alienated from the people, and his supporters were started to intensify the terror. As a result, wherever they find the people who committed the crime, they were all caught and immediately they were killed. This type of terror was continued nearly 46 days. So that is why here we say July 27th, 1794, the convention turned against Robespierre and its supporters. Last, he was also guillotined. Then the National Convention was made it as what? Directory, because that was abolished. Directory was established. The directory assumed office on October 1795, which consisted of what? 5 members, but it is short-lived. After that, a council was established. The first consul was Napoleon Bonaparte. See, later, a few days, Napoleon Bonaparte, he abolished the consulate and he himself declared as emperor and king of France. Now, in this way, the people's dreams, ideas, and poor man's conditions which were shattered at the time of Napoleon Bonaparte, because he emerged as again as what a monarchy. But however, we observe that in France existed still it continued republican ideas, equality, liberty, and it has marched in the way of what is setting up of a constitutional form of government, and it became a republic. So, last we are coming to children, impact of or results of French Revolution. As a result of French Revolution, what happened? Very first, that is France got a freedom, that is it got a constitutional type of government abolishing absolute monarchy. Next, what happened means the three watchwords became as important. They were left: liberty, equality, fraternity. These were what were watchwords means: liberty, equality, and fraternity. Then state power was empowered. The clergy people power was reduced, and sovereignty of people were empowered, and assertive middle class were raised. And finally, feeling of nationalism was developed because of unification of the people at the time of revolution. Finally, I come to conclusion. As a result of these revolutions, Europe and worldwide, there were a possibility of setting up of a liberal democracy